So our whole focus, and you heard from my boss, Bill Hornbuckle, this morning, the focus of this panel is about personalization and the importance of personalization. And I know we also heard from one of the speakers this morning about millennials. So I want to open it up to this group. Any other, maybe we'll start with Amanda, any other trends that you're seeing beyond what they showed this morning in terms of personalization and how consumers are consuming? What do you, as the consultants here, I'll put you on the spot.
South Africa is an incredible market because in some senses it's incredibly advanced, in other senses it's incredibly rural and basic. So as a marketer, you've got to take that into account because the masses, there's a big wealth split, so the masses, everybody is mobile enabled, so even somebody who lives in a wood shack has a mobile, has a cellular phone. So people are really getting used to the fact that they can constantly be in touch, can be promoted to, and SMS is very much a very powerful and effective and established way of being spoken to, as basic as it is. Obviously, the individuals who don't have disposable income aren't playing around on social networks and so on. And then you've got the wealthier end of the market, the more international side of South Africa, that I would say is very similar to what I'm hearing here in the USA, where they're fully advanced, fully enabled as such, and expect personalization, expect nothing less, and expect to be wowed from every aspect of loyalty. So as a marketer, you've got to understand the differences, and you've got to be able to apply the differences with the same brand if your brand crosses some of the wealth divide.
That's great, thank you. Derek, from your perspective, you handle the analytics side for the call center at American Express. Talk about it from that angle. A lot of us don't think about making sure that our call center reps understand personalization and what trends you're seeing from that perspective.
Thanks. Personalization can be so close to home. You imagine you go into a store and they know you, they know your preferences, and they make something happen for you, and you feel at home with them. And the concept of one-to-one marketing really has to be enabled by this personalization to a point. At some point in time, if somebody's going to wake up and say, wow, you know where I am at all points because you're on your phone, and then privacy comes in. So there's a very fine line that I believe we all have to manage very carefully between personalization, I know you, it's relevant, it's value add, versus Big Brother watching over you, it's just to push my agenda, not yours, and it's got nothing to do with the relationship and everything to do with your profit margins. So we balance that on a day-to-day basis, 60 million calls a year, trying to determine if this is the right time to tell you how much I know you and how much I think you could get out of your product versus you just want to get off the call. And that personalization is not just what the data shows you, but the conversation, the interaction, wow, this person's really rushed or pissed off. And at that point in time, no matter what your models are telling you, there's a human interaction that needs to happen and trump the business opportunity and with the relationship building component.
Great. Monica, maybe you can talk next about, because you are heavily involved in the Nook, I think, right?
Yes, I had some involvement.
Yes. So talk about how you took your data and segmented it so that you could introduce a new product. Because, obviously Barnes & Noble, big retailer, sells a bunch of books. How did you leverage all that to get into your new product?
So it's really more of understanding the data. Since Barnes & Noble is, traditional, we're talking about brick and mortar and physical books. Now we are migrating to now a digital world, and it is a digital world. Everyone's always connected. Everyone needs mobile devices. So it's really finding that fine line of who your customers are innately. So it's really taking the customers, or like Barnes & Noble, really understanding who has the propensity to buy or who would migrate to really being digital. At the same time, there's also like an acquisition effort on it because, the whole marketing, whether it's going to be in print or in commercial, but bringing people into the ecosystem. Now, that's challenge one. Challenge two, when you actually they're in the ecosystem, how do you keep them engaged? Because since, the price point's a lot higher, because you need a device first in order to buy the book, or you could even download the free mobile devices, whether for the iPad, the iPhone, or your BlackBerry. But it's really to find that behavior, which customer would have the propensity to buy at what device, and taking it from there, but also understanding the customer lifecycle value of it.
Great. Luke, from your perspective, the personalization, how do you do, because a lot of what you're doing is business sales. I know you have the consumer side too, but talk to me about, do you personalize stuff on the business side, and then you can also throw in some consumer thinking too?
Okay. Well, I'm not going to throw in too much on the consumer side. Shutterfly has two clients. One is our .com side, which is the consumer side, which is printing photo memories, and you're all probably familiar with that. But I'm on the commercial side, and we are focused on using that same quality platform to produce direct mail, and primarily direct mail for business to consumer. So there's a Shutterfly commercial. But I wanted to qualify the answer. So what was the question?
So how do you personalize in the B2B sales?
So I think Rick earlier today said we're in the business of making this about the individual, and obviously Shutterfly does. Everything that we do is about the individual. And conversely, on the business side, every single piece of mail that we produce is personalized. So because we're data-driven and we're completely digital direct-to-mail, every piece that goes out is focused on that individual. And depending on the type of clients that we have, that personalization can be as focused as based on recency, frequency, and monetary when they were last here and what their cycles look like, or it can be as general as what we call something that might be more versioned and less specific. What the trending that we're seeing, I think that was the original question. There's two trends that we're seeing. One is that our organizations are starting kind of on the high level and digging a little bit deeper into personalization. And with the platform, either through email or through direct mail, you have that ability to build more content and more intelligence into each communication, and then measure that and see what the effect of that is on an ongoing basis. The other trending that we're seeing is there is a tighter integration of marketing. So instead of this channel marketing where you have the email group and you have a direct mail group and you have the media group, those are all starting to integrate, and organizations like MGM are looking at creating a living platform as opposed to, again, segregating the channels that people are using.
That's great. And Greg, welcome. So the question, you and I are both in the same industry, and we have tons of data on our folks. You're in a little bit of a different model with the hub and spoke that you've got going on. How do you use personalization? If you don't know, there's harrows all across the nation, and then a lot of them get driven here. So how do you use personalization to market to your customers, to get them to go to the casinos in Kansas City as well as come here?
Well, I gotta say it's been quite a challenge trying to cross-market. It is an easier sell to bring anybody pretty much from anywhere else to Vegas than taking Vegas out of the equation. Maybe Atlantic City is a next stretch, but to drive somebody to Tunica, for example, if you weren't in that area, that's a challenge. So I would say that what we do from a personalization push is really just try to push the players and the guests to really to incentivize them to go someplace closer to them and just enjoy their experience there. How we go about it, for the most part, we do our best to recognize and follow what the guests and the audience does without being a stalker, to your point. We don't want to be too creepy, but to some extent we do want to be a little bit more advanced than the competitors by trying to recognize where somebody had come from on the digital side, or whether that be a website or even a locale, and trying to kind of guess what it is they might be looking for. And then there is an inherent challenge beyond that, right? It's what do you want to push your audience to see and potentially convert to, versus what do you think they want which isn't always the same thing, right? The most profitable thing isn't always what they're always looking for. So it's always finding that mix. I only have so much real estate on my website. What do I put up top? What they're looking for or what I want to sell them? So it's constantly evolving and measuring and monitoring that mix to find the right mix.
And then, from an MGM Resorts perspective, and by the way, thank you all for being here at one of our resorts. Appreciate that. And I know that Caesars does this too. We have a lot of the text messaging programs that are opt-in, and people, especially when they're in town, you can opt in, and then we'll send you special deals and such. We'll know that you went to something last night, and you may want to go to something like it tonight. So that's and then all that Bill spoke about this morning, because you saw Bill speak this morning. Let's move the other premise person, Monica. You have a premise. Do you do any what I call premise marketing? So, like, people are in your stores and they've opted in, and so you give them something special.
We do, especially for our members when they're in our stores. We know that they're members, and usually, let's say if they're a member and they don't own a Nook, but most likely they might be interested in a Nook, then we would try to do some offers from there. We do a lot of couponing just to really drive the whole multi-channel, because a lot of our members are shopping in store, but it's also bringing that awareness online. So it's that constant fluidity of balancing the multi-channel shopping. So there is that holistic thing, and trying to do dynamic offers from that.
Luke, have you done any? The next question on here is building off segmented data to optimize your programs, your marketing programs. Have you done any? Have you used any segmentation schemes that you're aware of? Maybe not in the business side, and maybe I'm asking a consumer question, but.
No, I think that's a good question on the business side, and I don't know if that's loaded because we do a lot of work with your property. But again, because it's personalization driven, everything that we do also is segmented. So that segmentation could be basically anything that's out there. Again, our platform is fully digital, so if you think about email or digital print, they're essentially the same now. All of the flexibility that you have in terms of pushing that data out to an individual on a web page, you have that same flexibility with doing it on direct mail. So, and the ability to do that is essentially free. So the level of segmentation that we're seeing is primarily focused around retention and loyalty as opposed to acquisition, because that's where most of the most relevant information is available, and it's based on the specific verticals that we're working in. So we're in most of the major verticals: gaming, automotive, healthcare, insurance, and retail. So each of those verticals has a different level of segmentation that they have accessible to them based on the degree of loyalty that they're offering.
Have any of you implemented a recommendations engine yet? So maybe, Derek, I see you nodding. Why don't you talk a little bit about the implementation of that?
So I'm responsible for putting up a CRM type platform that allows representatives to see the customer profile and then prompting up specific messages, treatments, and offers based on that profile. Our segmentation cuts a number of different ways: by product, by spend, by their tenure, which is actually quite rich. And what we found is that some of these segmentations need to be balanced across each other. So while I may have a Platinum Card member, they're new to the franchise. And what's the right thing to do for general Platinum Card holders is actually not the same as what an early tenure customer is. An early tenure customer, I've got to educate. I've got to welcome. I've got to embrace them and get them involved before I try to sell anything like that. So we use these components of the segmentations to define the various treatments that are available for a representative to prompt. But we also let the representative leverage the context of the call. If the person is upset, or if the person is talking about something that maybe they're not on a Platinum Card, but they're talking about travel, it's appropriate for me to make a Platinum offer because that's a travel product. even if the models may not necessarily say that is the best offer. So it's a balance, but we use a lot of these segmentations to create contextual offers. And as we move online to do even more, it gets very exciting for customers who are getting used to self-service. They're getting used to sharing information, and they kind of expect you to know them and do something with that. So we find that we're trying to keep up with our customers in their expectations for segmentation, which is fun.
Greg, what about from your perspective? I know that you do a lot of segmentation and the recommendation side. For you, which is similar to us, talk about how the variety. You have the high-end gaming guys all the way to somebody who comes through an Expedia, and how you think about that variety in your segmentation scheme.
Well, a lot of it is based on the channel. So obviously we could do a lot more on the web than a lot of other areas, and boil down, we could actually do some interesting things in the social side and Facebook side that we can't even do on our own website, based on information that we can get. As you know, playing in the gaming industry, there's a lot of restrictions that we have to be careful with. But I can tell you, I've only actually been with Caesars a short time, but I have a lot of agency experience, so I've worked with a lot of different brands, and I can tell you that, industries differ very much, but when it boils down to the actual foundation of segmentation, it's really all about, I think I might be beating up the point I just said it a minute ago, it's really about finding that balance of how much you can use the information you have or can get versus how much you should use, right? Because as you said, Derek, customers are starting to expect a different level of familiarity with them, but at the same time, Caesars, coming back to Caesars, we have a very interesting mix across our properties. You look at Planet Hollywood, I think our audience, they're okay. We could even experiment. We could potentially walk on that line of being a little bit too familiar. When it comes to Caesars Palace, we'll have some older audience that don't like this and don't want us to know where they're coming from and be able to tell that they're in, Dallas and know that much about them. And then we got the hangover customers, right, who just don't care. They just want the hangover package and want to keep it simple. But ultimately, it's just about finding the best tools to judge by which what I can and cannot serve up. Focus groups aren't quite the same as they used to be, but crowdsourcing is kind of that new concept where you could quickly survey people on the fly and get genuine answers. So we really lean a lot on the more, recent tools to allow us to get some instant, genuine, authentic answers that we could validate.
Amanda, think about, because you see a lot of different clients, so the effects of the personalization on, really increasing sales, and if you have any examples of that, because as marketers, we always get accused that we don't get the sales side, which is false, by the way. But anyway, if you could talk a little bit about how you've seen it drive sales, that would be great.
Okay, sure. Absolutely, it's false. The sales piece, I think, keeps us as marketers in our jobs, hopefully longer than a short period of time. I'll actually talk about a company I used to work for rather than as a client. Very typically, we used to do direct marketing, personalized. When I say direct marketing, I don't just mean by paper, all through the different channels. But there was one example where we did a monthly magazine, so very costly, but a monthly magazine to our top customers. So we used value segmentation and thought we were being really clever. We were really chuffed with what we were doing. We applied this value segmentation. At this stage, we hadn't had the lifestyle segmentation, and we used a little bit of life cycle work so we could see the customer behavior, and we'd apply it to our thinking. But we tried to measure the ROI on this magazine, a beautiful showcase of the retailer's best product. And we realized that the actual pure ROI of this monthly magazine was almost cost zero, profit zero, But when we mailed these customers or direct marketed them through any channel about anything else that we were trying to promote, whether it was cosmetics, foods, whatever, we saw a 3 times response level to those customers who didn't receive the magazine. So we were quite chuffed with that. So we sat on our laurels, and then along came lifestyle segmentation, which obviously the combination of life and value segmentation and lifestyle segmentation combined with life cycle. So we had a good old CRM engine behind us to do it. So we applied the lifestyle segmentation. We realized that we were talking to people who just bought kids wear, but we thought they were high value. So we sent them this beautiful magazine, but we didn't feature kids wear. Or we saw the very premium customer who bought top-end cosmetics. We'd send her kids wear, because she was in a different value segment. So as obvious as it is, now we are there and we've done it, we applied the lifestyle segmentation with the existing value segmentation, and we actually saw the profit off the magazine, because we could track the sales featured, went up 14-fold. So when I said it broke even, it did have marginal impact previously. Not plus 14%, 14-fold. And then obviously those customers were 3 times more profitable on other campaigns. So it was just so obvious. So then we went into even more finite segmentation on coupons and vouchers and so on. And we got to not quite the extremity you see in the food grocery retailers, like the Tesco's model of no 3 customers get more the same vouchers. But we went to a very, very finite segmentation. And we felt like it was a license to print money in the direct marketing space. So going back to some of the conversations this morning about you can only really get this through your organization if you've got the change leadership. The test and trial approach allowed us to go to the category managers and say, give me the money for the vouchers. I'm about to make you more money than you could have made through buying product and putting it in a broadsheet. And that was the approach. And effectively, we shifted an awful lot of discount margin and above-the-line advertising money into very select, targeted direct marketing.
Excellent. I thought I think we have 15 minutes left. I can ask more questions, but I thought I would open it up to the floor. I see we have a couple of mics. Is that okay, guys who are running? I think that's okay. But nobody's scrambling to the mics.
We can fill this space. We can keep you here all afternoon. When we talk about segmentation, I'm going to talk a little bit of a different approach, because I've had the luxury of working with a very good gaming client that took chances and was willing to see how extreme we could go with segmentation. So I'll tell you a little case study. This was a mailing that went to players on a regular basis that were loyal to this particular property. And when we started segmenting, we obviously would segment by the easy things. So in addition to name and geography, then we'd start looking into gaming preference. So first it was tables versus machines. And then once it was within machines, then it was real slots versus video slots. And the important thing is each time we would make these changes, we would measure this and see, or they would measure it and tell me, and see if there was a point of return that made sense. Doesn't make sense to talk to somebody if they have a preference for a real machine versus a video machine. Well, it seemed to. So then the next piece is, all right, then let's start breaking this down to denomination. If this is a quarter machine player versus a dollar machine player, does it matter if we start talking to them based on that? And then we kept going down and down. We got to the point where we actually looked at, where we actually experimented with showing the winners of, you see the mailings and you see the big winners holding the giant check. Well, we started breaking down those winners to where this particular piece was going. So if this mailing was going to a player from New York, doesn't matter that they get a picture of a winner from the East Coast, or it doesn't matter that they get a picture of a winner that was within kind of the monetary range of their play level or not, as opposed to irrelevancy. So we got to continue to go down until in segmentation and personalization, until we got to the point of no return, where we quit seeing the lift on that. And then they were able to back off of it, because obviously the more segmentation and driving you do, it does take time, it takes thought, and it takes decisions. And all that boils down to money. So if you don't need to go to that degree just because you have that data, and that's the seductive thing about all of us as marketers. We like to say we want to balance this, but if we have that content, we'd really love to use that to drive the sales as much as possible. So, where we're seeing this change is to be able to get to degree and measure that degree of personalization and then back off from there when it doesn't make sense anymore.
Any other panelists or have anything to add as you guys have been thinking up here? Derek does.
So I think one of the challenges that we have in the loyalty space, and especially with personalization, is not what we can do. The data is there. In fact, we're inundated with data. There's a tremendous amount we can do. But it's about defining the strategy and how this data, how the personalization can be used to optimize the customer lifetime value. So, for example, in American Express, one of the things that we need to do more of is really generate relevance and value for our membership rewards program. These are great points, but not everyone is using them. So how do we generate that opportunity to drive you know what, I know you've got a ton of points, and I know that you like music. How can I prompt up that opportunity to get you a ticket to a show that I know you like, or a new piece of equipment? I think the example today from Bill around how do I know the difference between a high roller who wants a jet airplane versus a person who just wants a pass in line with their 4-year-old to go to the circus. We've got to align what we can do with what we should do and how that reinforces the strategy, because otherwise we're a bit dangerous in terms of all the different directions this personalization could take us, and there's only so much we can do. So it comes back to good, solid strategy around what should we be doing and in what sequence.
And I also think different groups of people are going to let you serve up more than other groups of people. To Greg's point, of some of the older customers don't really want you to know where they are. That is, so the first thing to understand from a personalization perspective is who wants to even hear this stuff. So, man.
Also, just very simply to build on what you were saying is you can slice, we all know this, you can slice and dice that data until it's like one person. But are you going to get the return on investment if you slice and dice it less finely, but did a better job on the creative execution side, the power of the offer? I think sometimes as CRM people we get obsessed with the segmentation and the data without actually understanding what it feels like for the customer to receive it. Is this beautiful piece of collateral? Is it stunning? Would I put as much energy into this direct piece regardless of channel as I would into a TV ad? Probably not. If I look at the agencies I've worked with, or I look at creative or marketing people in my teams, we don't put as much effort into the communication beauty, but you must have the personalization, but sometimes you've got to draw a line under it. And we've got an expression, I don't know if it's a South African expression or if it exists here, where you say, you've got know about me and know me. It's particularly in the banking space. So your more private clients would be know me, and the mass consumer would be know about me. And I think building on this morning's presentation, that know me bit can never, ever be underestimated. And I loved the question, I think, you asked at the end over how can you apply that in retailing, for example. And I think we've all got to understand the combination. It's the science and soul. The science is there in the data. It'll always be there if you know how to apply it, but it's the soul that's going to get your results combined with science.
Great. Let's pass it down to Greg, and we'll have our brave soul who was asking a question. Go ahead.
I'll just speak up. Luke, you deal in the B2B side of things. That is working? Okay, Luke, you work in the B2B side of things. And in terms of the segmentation side into the businesses you work with, how do you actually get through the gatekeeper to get multiple contacts within the business and then do the segmentation within that appropriately? Or do you?
So if I heard your question right, it's on the B2B side to Luke. How do you get through, how do you use segmentation to get through the gatekeeper? Because there's always a gatekeeper in every company, to the people who are really going to be interested in your product. Is that what you asked?
Yeah, because there can be multiple stakeholders for the different messages you may have.
Usually we package it in an orange Shutterfly box and everybody just passes it through because they're real excited about getting their memory book, and then they open up and find out it's an offer. That's a good question, but honestly, most of the work that we're doing is business to consumer. So in terms of business to business, I don't know actually any work that we're doing on that side. So I'm sorry, I'd be making it up if I answered that question.
Thank you.
Yes, another question, then I'll go to Greg. Greg, I'll let you go since you've got...
Yeah, funny, it's not too far of a stretch from what I wanted to make sure I said. I speak a lot, but often when I speak, it's emerging tech or social. It's just what I've just kind of been attached to. And a point that I wanted to make actually brings back to the question you had. Analytics. You heard data a lot. Analytics seems to be the foundation behind digital because you can measure it a lot better than other channels, right? My concern about analytics, coming from a creative director here, an artist, so it's really easy for me to say, is analytics, or really answers, are only as good as the questions you ask. So very, very often I see a lot of companies or vendors come pitch me on things and justify some of the decisions they've made based on the data. And my concern and my emphasis here is really not anyone can be a marketer. Or not everyone can be good at being a marketer, right? So we all have instincts for it. If we don't, we quickly learn and we change positions. So I just want to make sure that we go back, think about and recognize the skills we have and what we've built and cultivated over years, and don't rely too much on tools and rely a little bit on instincts, because otherwise we can evolve to a bad place. So that's a bit of a deviation to your question, but that's just kind of my soapbox speech for today. More along the lines of your question, how to find that mix, I do think it depends on audience. I was going to say industry, but I think it depends on audience. We'll use Caesar's Palace for an example, since we just kind of brought it up a little bit about the different mix. We know that we have a wide audience there versus some of our other properties who are pretty obvious who the target market might be. So how we divvy up what expense we'll put into which audience is basically based on their behavior that we know about them. And again, it comes a lot of it comes back to instinct. So I think coming from the agency side, I think traditional means of marketing have shifted budgets aggressively to digital. But there are still a lot of people waiting at the bus stop. For some products, that's still very relevant. So ultimately, I like to, when I'm asked a question, where do I start? I often like to answer with, use tools, use partners, use smaller companies that are hungry to go out there and survey and find out. Potentially shameless plug, in the room is a partner of ours, a company called Social Rewards. I know MGM uses them too at times. It's a great tool for us that we found to go ahead and literally find sources of audience and what they're doing. Basically, the old expression, fish where the fish are. Well, it's a great tool or example of a tool that goes to where the fish are and finds out what they're doing while they're there. So I suggest in this age, looking at a lot of different kind of partners and tools that are out there and kind of working backwards, like reverse engineer your budget from there based on your learnings.
The other thing that's important, marketing and IT need to be completely married. So if you don't get along with your IT person, you better figure it out, because we always get along with IT. But there's so much with cloud technology, server-based technology, all the investments that have to happen there so that you can take care of your customers. Very important. One last question, since we had a second brave soul. Is that okay? And then we'll end.
I'll try and ask an open-ended question here to the panel. So we see data, make conclusions based on the data that we collected through client interactions. We also have profiles that we ask clients to complete. And I guess there's sort of an emerging third piece, which is kind of between the two, which is looking at maybe social media interactions. How do you strike the right balance, and how do you manage when you see conflicts between what the data is telling you your client wants to see and what your client has actually said, and how do you manage through that process?
Yeah, I mean the social media side we haven't really touched on, but it's a huge piece, and the personalization and the interaction of our social media. I have gazillions of brands that I support because it's not just the property; it's the shows and the restaurants, and it gets kind of ridiculous. But we do take data from the social side. If somebody's interacting with you from a social side, at least today, they're really an engaged customer for the most part. Unless they've been, we occasionally will get a group that will send out something to their organization and say, we're treating our dolphins horribly at the Mirage. And so those people will end up interacting with us in a different way, and we have to really manage that. And it's funny, nobody ever complains about the sharks. I don't know why. It's only the dolphins. I don't know, Derek, you seem posed to conclude this thing with...
Yeah, there's a difference between fact and fantasy. And I think we need to, understand the contract you have with a customer in terms of the information that you're gathering and what you're allowed to use, versus, the avatar concept of somebody who puts out that, I'm 6'7" and have blonde hair. I'm neither of those things, but I'd like to be. So, I'm skeptical about social media on the one hand, and I'm also, I have a lot of trepidation because it can go terribly wrong if you use it in an inappropriate way, or if things just turn there and then somebody gets very upset. So for me, what I look at most is the actual customer behavior, and then what they've given me in terms of a profile, beyond the basics of where their address is and those kinds of demographic components, and then finally go into a preferences based on kind of what they've talked about as a last element. But it's nowhere near as important for me in my business as the fact versus the fantasy.
Okay. I think
one thing I actually would like to add to that, it's really important for personalization or even dynamic content or understanding the customer is the implicit and explicit data. You really have to understand those two, because I could say to your point what I want to be or what I like to read based on what's happening in my environment right now, but you really have to look at, let's say for online channels, have your site tagged, really monitor that customer behavior, because that's what really powers your personalization engine, is what you think the customer definitely would want.
And be transparent, obviously. So, okay. Well, thank you all very much. Thank you, panel. It was great. Went fast. Thank you.